Hello everyone, welcome. My name's Jeff, and I'm a Developer Relations Engineer for Google Meridian. Today, we're going to be getting hands-on with the Meridian Scenario Planner. If you're running marketing mix modeling or MMMs with Google's Meridian, this is essentially where we transform our marketing budget from guesswork to decisive action. So, what is it? The Scenario Planner is an interactive Looker Studio dashboard that connects directly to your trained Meridian model. It lets you run what-if scenarios to figure out how to exactly allocate your marketing budget for maximum impact. Generating it is surprisingly simple, and it bridges the gap between your data science team and leadership. First, your data science team trains and vets your Meridian model in Python. In this demo, I'll write and load the saved model object to my Google Drive, but you're also welcome to use Google Cloud Storage or other storage connectors here, depending on your enterprise setup. Once your model is ready, you run the Scenario Planner Colab notebook provided in the Meridian documentation. This notebook basically processes your model output and automatically generates a unique Looker Studio link. You just click that link, authorize it with your Google account, and boom, you're looking at this interactive dashboard. We'll start here first on the Analyze tab. Before we plan for the future, we need to understand the past. This tab basically tells us how well our model actually understands our business. First, we'll look at R squared. This metric basically tells us the proportion of variance in the outcome variable that is explained by the model. So a value closer to 1 indicates a better fit, but we need to interpret this with care. The primary goal of an MMM is accurate causal inference, not predictive accuracy. So think of R squared as an important confidence check before we start spending money, rather than the ultimate proof of success. Next, we have the expected versus actual outcome chart. You want to see the expected line hugging the actual line as closely as possible throughout the timeline. This visualizes how well the model's predictions align with the actual observed data, proving it can accurately track your business's peaks and valleys. As we scroll down, we get to channel contribution. Look at the spend and outcome share side by side. This is a great quick glance efficiency check. If a channel makes up, say, 22% of your spend share, but drives 34% of your outcome, that's a heavy hitter. Finally, let's look at the ROI per channel charts. Meridian breaks this down beautifully into 3 key metrics. First is ROI. That's basically your historical average return for that channel. Next is effectiveness. This is essentially how much of your outcome is generated per unit of media execution, like say impressions. Last is marginal ROI or mROI. This tells you the expected return of your very next dollar you spend. Next, we move to the Plan tab. This is where we act like the CMO and set guardrails for our future budget. First, we set our initial budget. You can base this on a historical time period or manually type in a specific budget you want to plan for. So in this case here, I'll set it to 150 million. Next is a big decision, fixed versus flexible budget. A fixed budget is exactly what it sounds like. You tell Meridian, I have exactly $1 million. Tell me the best way to split it up to maximize my sales. On the other hand, a flexible budget flips the script. You tell Meridian, I want to hit a specific efficiency goal. Tell me how much I should spend and where. If you choose a flexible plan, there are special considerations. You basically have to tell the planner what goal you want to achieve. You can optimize towards a target ROI, which will give you overall portfolio efficiency, or a target mROI, which will ensure no channel drops below a certain marginal return threshold. Finally, we have channel constraints. This is basically how you keep the dashboard grounded in your business context. For each channel, you can define exactly how much less or more you're willing to spend. For example, you might say something like search can't drop more than, say, 10%. I'll set the upper bound here by 10%. Finally, we have channel constraints, and this is basically how you keep the dashboard grounded in your business context. For each channel, you can define exactly how much less or more you're willing to spend. For example, you might say something like channel 0, I don't want it to drop or increase by more than 10%. On the other hand, for maybe say another channel, maybe I don't want it to drop at all, but I also don't want it to increase more than say 20%. This ensures the planner gives you a realistic, executable media plan. So we've set the rules. So now let's look at the Optimize tab to see Meridian's recommendations for our hypothetical budget. Right at the top is the optimization overview. This is your executive summary. It shows you your optimized budget, or in other words, how much you're spending in the scenario, your optimized total ROI, and your optimized total outcome. It contrasts these right next to your historical baselines so you can immediately see the lift. Let's look at this detailed table below. So this is basically where the rubber meets the road. Notice the columns. So we have channel, which corresponds to our specific media channels. We also have our non-optimized budget versus our optimized budget. And this shows us exactly how our dollars are shifting. We also have our optimized outcome versus our non-optimized outcome. And this is essentially the sales impact of making that shift. Below the table, we have our optimized budget allocation charts. So this basically visually represents the shift. You can see which bars are growing and which ones are shrinking based on the model's recommendations. Finally, we have optimization with response curves. So this basically shows us the why behind the recommendation. Marketing channels in Meridian typically follow this C curve of diminishing returns. On these charts, you'll see where your historical spend sits on the curve, and you'll also see where the optimized spend sits. Meridian is basically moving dollars away from channels that are flatlining at the top of the curve and pouring them into channels that are still in that steep high growth phase. And there you have it. In just a few clicks, we went from raw MMM data to a highly visual, actionable media plan. The Looker Studio dashboard makes the Meridian Scenario Planner incredibly practical, low-code solution, especially when you need to justify budget shifts to your finance team or leadership like your CMO or CFO. I highly recommend spinning up a Colab notebook with your own model data and playing around with the fixed and flexible scenarios. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about setting up your channel constraints or reading about those response curves, drop them in the comments below. See you next time.